The chipped porcelain mug warmed my hands, but did little to thaw the ice in my chest. Rain lashed against the kitchen window, each drop a tiny hammer blow mirroring the ache in my heart. I watched my father's silhouette against the dim light, his shoulders stooped, carrying a weight I now understood intimately. He was a ghost in his own home, a man hollowed out by a secret he'd held for decades. It was a secret that had fractured our family, leaving irreparable cracks in the foundation of our lives. He stirred his tea, the spoon clinking softly, a sound that amplified the deafening silence between us. I finally found my voice, a whisper that felt too loud. "Dad," I began, my throat tight. "We need to talk about Mom." He flinched, his gaze snapping to mine, eyes wide with a fear I'd never seen before. The rain seemed to intensify, as if nature itself was weeping for our fractured past. He set his mug down with a tremor, the ceramic scraping against the formica. There's nothing to talk about, Sarah," he stammered, his voice raspy. I pushed the mug further away from him. "That's not true," I insisted, my own voice gaining strength. "I found the letters, I know." His face drained of color, leaving a pallor that spoke of years of suppressed guilt. His hands, once so strong, now trembled uncontrollably. The air crackled with unspoken accusations and buried truths. I could feel the history of our family pressing down on us in that small kitchen. Every creak of the old house seemed to groan with the weight of our shared pain. He finally met my gaze, and in his eyes, I saw a reflection of my own despair. The truth, once unearthed, was a brutal, unforgiving thing. It had been hidden for so long, festering like a wound that never healed. My mother, the woman I adored, had been living a lie, and my father, my quiet, stoic father, had been her unwitting accomplice. The letters, tied with a faded blue ribbon, were tucked away in an old hat box in the attic. They were written in her elegant, looping script, filled with a passion I never knew she possessed. Passion for a man who wasn't my father. Passion that had been carefully concealed beneath the veneer of our happy family life. I remembered the scent of her perfume, the way she hummed when she baked, the warmth of her hugs. All of it felt tainted now, a performance for an audience she never wanted to disappoint. The betrayal cut deeper than any physical wound. It was a violation of trust, a distortion of my entire childhood. My father finally spoke, his voice barely audible. I didn't know how to tell you." He looked utterly broken. "It wasn't your fault," I whispered, though the words felt hollow. How could it not be his fault? He had let this happen. He had allowed her to live this double life. He had allowed me to grow up believing in a fairy tale. The rain continued its relentless assault, a soundtrack to our unraveling. I looked at him, this man who had always been my rock, and saw him crumble before my eyes. He was just as much a victim as I was, trapped in a web of deceit spun by the woman he loved. The truth was a venom, spreading through our veins, poisoning everything we thought we knew. I stood up, needing to escape the suffocating atmosphere of the kitchen. "I need some air," I said, my voice strained. I walked out the back door, into the storm. The cold rain hit my face, a stinging baptism. I ran, not knowing where I was going, just needing to outrun the ghosts of my past. The wind whipped my hair around my face, carrying the scent of damp earth and pine needles. Each gust felt like a shove, urging me forward, away from the wreckage of my family. The world outside was as chaotic as the turmoil within me. I stumbled, catching myself on a wet oak tree. Its rough bark felt grounding, a small anchor in the storm. I leaned against it, my breath coming in ragged gasps. The image of my mother's smiling face flashed in my mind, followed by the stark reality of her hidden life. It was a paradox I couldn't reconcile. How could someone be so loving and so deceptive at the same time? My father's quiet grief, his years of unspoken pain, now made a terrible kind of sense. He had loved her enough to endure this. He had chosen silence over shattering our world. But in doing so, he had shattered it anyway. The storm raged on, mirroring the tempest in my soul. I closed my eyes, trying to find some semblance of peace. The rain washed over me, but it couldn't cleanse the hurt. It felt like a permanent stain, etched into my very being. I thought of my mother's laughter, the sound I had cherished most. Was it genuine? Or was it just another part of the charade? The questions swirled, unanswered, leaving me adrift in a sea of confusion. I opened my eyes and looked up at the dark, swirling clouds. They seemed to hold all the secrets of the world, and I had just unearthed one of its most devastating. The smell of wet earth filled my lungs, a primal scent that spoke of renewal, of growth from decay. But I couldn't see any renewal in my future, only the lingering shadow of betrayal. I turned back towards the house, the light from the kitchen window, a beacon in the darkness. My father was still there, waiting for me to return, to confront the broken pieces of our lives. I knew I couldn't run forever. The truth, however painful, had to be faced. The storm was beginning to subside, leaving behind a heavy, sodden silence. The air was thick with the aftermath, the world reshaped by the downpour. I walked slowly back to the house, my steps heavy with a newfound burden. I had crossed a threshold, and there was no going back. The woman I thought I knew was gone. The family I believed in was a carefully constructed illusion, and I was left to pick up the scattered fragments. My father was still at the table when I re-entered the kitchen. He hadn't moved. He looked like a statue carved from sorrow. He watched me, his eyes pleading for understanding. I sat down opposite him, the silence stretching between us, heavier than before. The rain had stopped outside, but the storm inside me was far from over. It was just beginning to brew. I picked up my mug, the porcelain cold now. The warmth had long since faded, much like the innocence I had lost today. He finally spoke, his voice a low rumble. "I loved her, Sarah." It was a simple statement, but it carried the weight of a lifetime. "I know, Dad," I replied, my voice surprisingly steady. "But it wasn't enough, was it?" He looked down at his hands, his fingers interlaced. He didn't answer. The unspoken truth hung in the air, a tangible presence. The smell of damp earth still clung to me, a reminder of the outside world and the reality it held. I knew this was just the beginning, the first crack in a dam that had held back a flood of pain for years. My mother's legacy was a complicated one, a legacy of love and deception. And now, it was mine to navigate. I looked at my father, his face etched with a grief that went soul deep. He had loved her fiercely, and he had been broken by her choices. I felt a pang of sympathy for him, a flicker of understanding amidst the anger. He had been a silent witness to a tragedy, and now he was forced to confront its consequences. The clock on the wall ticked loudly, each second a reminder of time passing, of lives lived and lost. The kitchen, once a place of comfort and warmth, now felt like a stage for our shared sorrow. I thought about the future, about how we would ever move past this. It seemed impossible. The damage was too profound, the lies too deeply entrenched. But as I looked at my father, at the raw vulnerability in his eyes, I knew we had to try. We were all that was left of this fractured family. We had to find a way to heal, to rebuild, even if the foundation was forever scarred. The rain had stopped. The world outside was quiet, but the silence in our kitchen was deafening. It was filled with the echoes of unspoken words and the ghosts of buried truths. I took a deep breath, the scent of damp earth a faint reminder of the storm I had just weathered. It was time to face whatever came next, together, or not at all. The chipped mug felt heavy in my hands, a tangible symbol of our brokenness, but also, perhaps, a symbol of our resilience. We would have to be resilient. We had no other choice. The dawn was breaking outside, painting the sky with hues of gray and soft pink. A new day, but one that would be forever shadowed by the revelations of the night. I looked at my father, and for the first time, I saw not just a father, but a man who had loved and lost deeply. And in that moment, a fragile bridge began to form between us. A bridge built on shared pain and a desperate need for understanding. The journey ahead would be long and arduous, but we would take the first step together. He finally looked up, his eyes red-rimmed but clear. "We have to talk about it, Sarah. We can't let this destroy us." His voice was stronger now, tinged with a newfound resolve. I nodded, the weight on my chest easing slightly. Talking felt like a lifeline. The raw truth, however agonizing, was better than the suffocating silence. "Yes," I agreed, my voice a little shaky. "We have to." The dawn light crept through the kitchen window, illuminating the dust motes dancing in the air. It was a gentle light, a stark contrast to the darkness of the night. The storm had passed, leaving a world washed clean, but the emotional tempest within us still raged. My father reached across the table, his hand covering mine. His skin was rough, calloused from years of work, but his touch was surprisingly tender. It was a gesture of comfort, an unspoken apology. "Your mother," he began, his voice catching. "She was a complicated woman." He paused, searching for the right words. She had a depth of feeling I don't think anyone truly understood. Not even me, completely. He squeezed my hand gently. "She loved you very much, Sarah. More than anything." I wanted to believe him. I truly did. But the letters painted a different picture, or at least a more complex one. They spoke of a love that consumed her, a love that was forbidden. "Who was he, Dad?" I asked, the question tumbling out before I could stop it. The name was a phantom on my tongue, a ghost I was afraid to conjure. He hesitated, his gaze drifting to the window. "His name was David. He was an artist." He sighed, a sound heavy with regret. "They met years before I did. It was a whirlwind, passionate, all-consuming."
Trembling.
He looked back at me, his eyes filled with a familiar sadness.
Spars.
"When she met me, she was already
Echoing percussion.
entangled. But she chose me.
A heartbeat.
She chose stability. She chose our family."
Plans
The words hung in the air,
stretching into
heavy
the void.
and suffocating. She had chosen us, but not without a piece of her heart
Heavy with
belonging
unease.
elsewhere. It was a sacrifice, a compromise that had shaped our entire existence.
Like
Did you
footsteps
know?
in fog,
I whispered, the
slow,
question I had been dreading asking.
each
When you
beat
married
a
her,
warning.
did you know? He looked at me, and for a
Dreams
long
shiver,
moment, his silence was an answer in
twisting into
itself.
a dissonant wail.
Then, he
Pens
shook his head
pulse,
slowly.
a deep
No,
inhale before
He said,
silence,
his voice firm.
the final beat
Not then.
lands,
Not for a long time.
heavy
I
as
suspected
regret.
there were moments, whispers. But she was so good at hiding
Pangs
things,
fading to
so good at
nothingness,
presenting a perfect facade.
a single note
He ran a thumb
bending
over my
away.
hand. I chose to believe the best.
Silence returns.
I chose to trust her because I loved her. The raw honesty in his voice was disarming. He hadn't been a fool. He had been a man in love who had desperately wanted to believe in the woman he adored. And the letters? I prompted, my voice still a little raw. When did you find them? About 10 years ago, he admitted, his gaze falling back to his hands. I was looking for some old tax documents in her closet. I found them tucked away in a shoebox, hidden behind some winter blankets. I read some of them. His voice was barely audible. It was like a punch to the gut, a betrayal I never imagined. My breath hitched. He had known for a decade of living with this secret, of watching her, of knowing. Why didn't you say anything? The question was laced with a hurt I hadn't expected. Why let me believe? Because, he interrupted, his voice filled with a weary resignation. I didn't want to destroy you, or her. I thought maybe it was best left buried, that the pain of knowing would be worse than the pain of ignorance. He looked at me, his eyes pleading. I made a mistake, Sarah, a terrible mistake. I should have talked to her. I should have confronted her, but I was afraid of losing her, afraid of breaking you. The irony was brutal. His fear of breaking me had, in the end, shattered me just as surely. He had protected her, and in doing so, had erased a part of my own reality. So, you lived with it, I said, the words tasting like ash. You lived a lie too. He nodded, his shoulders slumping. We all did, in our own way. She lived with the guilt. I lived with the suspicion. And you lived with a version of our family that wasn't entirely real. He met my gaze, his eyes filled with a profound sadness. I am so sorry, Sarah. The apology, so long overdue, hung in the air. It was a start, a fragile, tentative start. The sun was higher now, casting long shadows across the room. The kitchen felt different. The air was still thick with unspoken things, but there was a nascent understanding, a shared vulnerability. What happened to David? I asked, the question feeling both intrusive and necessary. I needed to know the full story, the context of my mother's hidden life. He moved away, my father said, his voice distant. After she chose me, he disappeared. She never saw him again, as far as I know. But the passion, it never truly died. It just found a different outlet. Her art, her garden, the things she poured her heart into. I thought about her paintings, vibrant and full of life. Her garden, a riot of color and fragrance. Had those been echoes of that lost love? Were they expressions of a passion she could no longer freely give to a person? It was a dizzying thought. It explained so much, yet opened up a universe of new questions. She loved you, Dad. I said softly, the words feeling more true now. She chose you. She built a life with you. And I loved her, he replied, his voice thick with emotion. Despite everything, I loved her. It's hard to let go of that, to reconcile the woman I loved with the secrets she kept. He looked at me, a flicker of hope in his eyes. But we have to try, Sarah. For her, for us. We have to understand, and we have to forgive. Forgiveness felt like an impossible mountain to climb. The wound was still too fresh, the betrayal too raw. But looking at my father, at his brokenness and his quiet strength, I knew he was right. We couldn't stay trapped in the past, consumed by anger and resentment. We had to find a way forward, together. I don't know if I can forgive her, I admitted, my voice barely a whisper. Not yet. It feels like everything I knew was a lie. I know, he said, his hand tightening on mine. It's a lot to process. But you're not alone in this, Sarah. We'll figure it out. Together. He looked at me, his gaze steady and unwavering. We'll rebuild, brick by brick, even if the foundation is a little shaky. I managed a weak smile. The idea of rebuilding felt overwhelming, but his presence, his shared pain, made it seem less daunting. We were survivors of a shared trauma, bound by blood and by the unraveling of a carefully constructed reality. The dawn was fully here now, bathing the kitchen in a warm, golden light. The world outside was waking up, oblivious to the seismic shift that had occurred within these walls. What do we do now? I asked, the question a plea for guidance. He released my hand and stood up, stretching his stiff limbs. We start by talking, he said, his voice firm. We talk about everything, the good, the bad, the ugly. We unearth every buried truth, no matter how painful. And then, he paused, looking out the window at the sun-drenched world. Then we decide how to live with it, how to honor her memory, the good parts, without letting the secrets define us. He walked over to the sink, turning on the tap. The sound of running water filled the silence. He began to rinse out his mug, the familiar action a small comfort in the face of the unknown. I watched him, a sense of quiet determination settling over me. The path ahead was uncertain, fraught with emotional landmines. But for the first time since finding those letters, I felt a flicker of hope. We had faced the truth, the brutal, unvarnished truth. And in that shared exposure, there was a promise of something new, something real. As he placed the clean mug back on the counter, he turned to me, his expression serious. There's one more thing, he said, his voice dropping slightly. About David. When he left, he gave your mother something. A small, carved wooden bird. She kept it hidden too. I found it after she passed. He looked directly at me. I think it's time you saw it. His gaze held mine, the unspoken weight of another hidden secret now pressing down. He walked over to a small, unassuming cabinet by the refrigerator. His fingers fumbled for a moment with the handle, a slight tremor betraying his outward calm. He opened it, revealing a collection of old jars and tins, their labels faded and worn. He reached inside, his hand moving with deliberate slowness, and withdrew a small, velvet-lined box. It was a jewelry box, ornate and clearly old, with intricate floral carvings on its lid. He placed it carefully on the table between us, the polished wood gleaming in the morning light. She kept it here, he said, his voice barely a whisper. With her most precious things. I never knew it was here until I was going through her belongings after the funeral. It was tucked away in the back, under some old linens. He opened the box with a soft click. Inside, nestled on a bed of faded crimson velvet, lay a small, intricately carved wooden bird. I leaned closer, my breath catching. It was exquisite. The wood was smooth and dark, polished to a rich sheen. The bird, a robin, was captured in mid-flight, its wings delicately spread, its tiny head tilted as if about to sing. The craftsmanship was astonishing, each feather meticulously detailed, the eyes mere pinpricks that seemed to hold a spark of life. It was undeniably beautiful, a testament to the artist's skill. It's beautiful, I managed, my voice thick with emotion. It felt like holding a piece of my mother's hidden heart, a tangible link to the forbidden passion my father had spoken of. My father nodded, his gaze fixed on the bird. David was a master craftsman as well as a painter. He made it for her, a symbol of their freedom, I suppose, their dreams. He picked up the bird, his fingers tracing its delicate form. She never wore it, never displayed it. It was too much of a reminder, perhaps, or too precious to risk being discovered. I reached out, my fingertip brushing against the cool, smooth wood. It felt strangely warm, as if it held the echoes of my mother's touch, of David's love. This small object, hidden away for decades, was a silent narrator of a story I was only just beginning to comprehend. It spoke of a love that defied reason, a love that existed in the shadows, a love that had left an indelible mark. Did you ever consider confronting him? I asked, the question a natural extension of this unearthed secret. My father sighed, a sound that seemed to carry the weight of years. There was a time, early on, when I considered it, when the suspicion was a constant ache in my chest. But what would have been the point? He was gone, and she had made her choice. To confront him would have only brought more pain, more upheaval, for all of us. He looked at me, his eyes filled with a deep weariness. I chose peace, or what I thought was peace. The word peace felt like a cruel joke. Their lives had been built on a foundation of unspoken truths, of carefully guarded secrets. It was a fragile peace, easily shattered, and it had been. And you? I asked, my gaze unwavering. Did you ever try to find out where he went? Once or twice, he admitted, his voice low. Years ago, I looked into it, but he had vanished, like a ghost. No forwarding address, no trace. It was as if he had simply ceased to exist. Perhaps that was for the best, for everyone involved. He placed the wooden bird back in its velvet nest. Your mother, she buried him deep. But some things, Sarah, they don't stay buried forever. They resurface in unexpected ways. He closed the box, the click echoing in the quiet kitchen. The silence that followed was different from before. It was no longer a void filled with unasked questions, but a space holding the weight of newly revealed truths. The dawn light now streamed fully through the window, illuminating the table, the box, and the weary lines on my father's face. So, this is it then? I asked, my voice a little shaky. The final piece of the puzzle? Perhaps, he said, his gaze thoughtful. Or perhaps it's just another clue. The journey of understanding your mother and our family is not a short one. It's a long exploration of the human heart, its capacity for love, for sacrifice, and for complexity. He looked at the wooden bird, a faint smile touching his lips. She loved him, and she loved me, and she loved you. She was a woman who held multitudes within her. It's our task now to try and hold them too. I picked up the box, its weight surprisingly substantial in my hands. I felt a strange sense of responsibility, of guardianship over this tangible piece of my mother's secret life. "What should I do with it?" I asked, looking at my father. He met my gaze, his expression gentle. "Keep it, Sarah. Keep it safe. Let it be a reminder of the woman she was, in all her facets. Let it remind you that love can take many forms, and that sometimes the deepest passions are the ones we hide the best." He stood up, moving towards the counter. "Now, I think we've had enough emotional excavation for one morning. How about some breakfast? We have a lot of living to do, and we can't do it on an empty stomach." He busied himself with making coffee, the familiar scent filling the air, a comforting anchor in the storm of emotions. I remained seated, turning the velvet box over in my hands, the wooden bird a silent witness to a love story that spanned decades, a story I was now a part of. The sun was fully up, its warmth a promise of a new day, a new beginning. But as I looked at the box, at the exquisite carving within, I knew that the shadows of the past would always linger, a reminder of the intricate tapestry of our lives. The question of how to truly weave these new threads into the fabric of our present, however, remained. He placed 2 steaming mugs on the table. "Coffee's ready," he announced, his voice a little lighter. "And I found some of those blueberry muffins your mother used to buy from the bakery down the street. A little taste of normalcy." He sat down opposite me, his movements deliberate. I took a sip of the coffee, its warmth spreading through me. It was good coffee, strong and rich. The muffins were indeed from the bakery, a familiar, comforting taste. Yet even with these simple comforts, the weight of the revelation still pressed down. The wooden bird, safely tucked back into its box, felt like a secret I carried within me now. "Thank you," I said, my voice steadier, for everything." He waved a dismissive hand. "We're family, Sarah. This is what we do. We navigate the storms together." He picked up a muffin, taking a bite. "So, David, the artist, the lover. It's a lot to take in, I know. But he was a part of her life, a significant part." "Did you ever resent him?" I asked, the question popping out before I could stop it. My father paused, his gaze distant. "Resentment is a corrosive thing, Sarah. It eats away at you. I did, for a while, when I was younger and my own understanding of things was less developed. I saw him as a threat, a rival." He looked at me, his eyes clear. "But as I got older, and I understood more about your mother, about the pressures she was under, about the limitations of her life, my feelings shifted. He was a refuge for her, a place where she could be herself, express herself, something she couldn't do in other aspects of her life." "But it was still a betrayal," I said, the word feeling sharp. "Yes," he conceded. "It was, and that pain was real, for me. But I also saw how much she loved him, and how much she loved you, and how much she loved me, in her own way. It was a complicated love, Sarah, a messy, human love, not the neat, tidy kind you read about in books." He finished his muffin. "And your mother, she was a woman of immense strength and immense vulnerability. She made choices that were difficult, but I believe she always tried to do what she thought was best, even when it meant carrying a great burden." I considered his words. It was hard to reconcile the mother I knew, the pragmatic, sometimes distant woman, with the passionate artist he described, the woman who harbored a secret, decades-long love. But the letters, the bird, they were undeniable. "What about his art?" I asked. "Did he ever show you any of his paintings? Anything that might have been hers?" My father shook his head. "No, he disappeared before I ever had a chance to see his work. And your mother never spoke of it. It was like a closed door." A part of her life she kept entirely separate. Perhaps she felt it was too painful to revisit, or perhaps she wanted to protect us from it. "But now we have the bird," I said, looking at the velvet box on the table. "It's proof. It's a tangible piece of their connection." "Exactly," he agreed. "And it's a reminder that our understanding of people, even those closest to us, is often incomplete. We see the surface, the everyday reality. But beneath that, there are always hidden depths, unspoken stories." He reached for the coffee pot. "Would you like another cup?" I nodded, accepting the refill. The warmth was a comfort. The morning was unfolding, a strange blend of the mundane and the extraordinary. "So, what happens now?" I asked, voicing the question that still hung in the air. Do we tell anyone? About David? About the letters?" My father's expression became serious. "That's a decision we have to make together, Sarah. It's your mother's story too, and you have a right to decide how it's shared. But I think, for now, it's best kept within the family. There's no need to bring more pain or confusion into the world. The people who need it to know already do." He looked out the window. The world outside is still the same. The sun is shining. People are going about their lives, unaware of the secrets we hold. And perhaps for them, it's better that way. "But it changes everything for us," I said, my voice quiet. "It does," he acknowledged. "It changes how we see your mother, how we see our family. But it doesn't erase the love that was there. It doesn't erase the good times. It just adds a layer of complexity and perhaps a deeper understanding." He turned back to me, his gaze steady. "We have a choice, Sarah. We can let this knowledge consume us, fill us with bitterness and regret. Or we can learn from it. We can use it to build a stronger, more honest foundation for our own lives, to be more open, more forgiving, more real." I looked down at the velvet box, then at the wooden bird peeking out. It was a symbol of a hidden life, of a love that had existed in the shadows. But it was also a symbol of resilience, of a spirit that found a way to express itself, even within constraints. I think," I began, my voice gaining strength. "I think we need to understand her better. Not just the mother we knew, but the woman she was. The woman who loved David, who painted in secret, who carried these burdens." "That's a good place to start," my father said, a hint of relief in his voice. "And we can do that by talking, by remembering, by piecing together the fragments of her life. It won't be easy. There will be more difficult questions, more moments of doubt, but we'll face them together." He stood up, gathering the mugs. "I'll do the dishes. You take some time, with the box, with your thoughts. And then, when you're ready, we can start talking about the good parts, about the laughter, about the joy. Because there was joy, Sarah. Don't ever forget that." He walked into the kitchen, the clatter of plates a familiar sound. I remained at the table, the velvet box in my hands. The sun was higher now, its light no longer tentative but bold and bright. The world outside was indeed oblivious, but here, in this kitchen, a new understanding was beginning to dawn. The secrets, once buried, were now unearthed, and the task of rebuilding, of truly understanding, had just begun. I opened the box again, lifting the wooden bird. It felt strangely light now, no longer a burden, but a key to unlocking a hidden chamber within myself, a chamber that held the complex, enduring legacy of my mother. The silence that followed my father's departure into the kitchen was not empty, but filled with the hum of the refrigerator and the distant chirping of birds. I traced the smooth, cool contours of the wooden bird with my fingertip. Its wings were carved with such delicate precision, each feather a testament to David's skill. It wasn't just a trinket, it was a masterpiece of quiet devotion. I imagined my mother, her hands usually busy with household tasks, holding this object. Perhaps she'd run her thumb over these same wings when she was alone, a silent communion with the man she loved. I opened the velvet box again, carefully lifting the small stack of letters. They were tied with a faded silk ribbon, the paper brittle and yellowed with age. My father's words echoed in my mind. She loved him, and she loved me, and she loved you. The complexity he spoke of was a labyrinth, and I was just beginning to navigate its winding passages. I hesitated for a moment, the weight of their intimacy pressing down. These were not meant for my eyes, not initially. But my mother's absence had created a void, a need for answers that only these words could fill. Gently, I untied the ribbon. The scent of old paper and something faintly floral, perhaps lavender, rose to meet me. The handwriting was elegant, flowing, utterly unlike my mother's neat, practical script. The first letter began, "My dearest Eleanor," and a pang of recognition shot through me. Eleanor. It was the name David had used for her in his brief, cryptic note. This was her secret identity, her hidden life. "My dearest Eleanor," the letter read. "Another week has passed since I last saw your radiant smile. The studio feels empty without your presence, the colors muted, the light dim. I find myself sketching your likeness from memory, trying to capture the spark in your eyes, the curve of your lips. Do you ever think of me when you are surrounded by the mundane?" My breath hitched. Mundane. It was a word that could easily have described my mother's life before this revelation. The routine, the predictable rhythm of our family. Had she felt trapped? Had she felt unseen? The questions tumbled over each other, each one more insistent than the last. I continued to read, my eyes scanning the elegant script. David wrote of their stolen moments, of the way her laughter could lift his spirits, of the profound connection they shared. He spoke of his art, of his struggles and triumphs, and how she was his muse, his inspiration. "Your passion for your work," he wrote, "is a fire that burns so brightly within you. I see it when you speak of your garden, of the joy you find in nurturing life. And I see it in the way you look at the world, with a wonder that few possess. It is this vibrant spirit that drew me to you, Eleanor. And it is this spirit that I cherish above all else." He described a particular painting, a landscape of rolling hills bathed in golden light. He said he painted it for her, a reminder of their shared dreams, of a place where they could be free. He mentioned the colors he used, the way he tried to capture the feeling of the wind on their skin. My father had said David disappeared before he could see his work. Had this painting ever been finished? Did it still exist somewhere? The letters were a testament to a love that was both forbidden and deeply profound. They painted a picture of my mother I had never seen, a woman who was capable of immense passion. of a secret life lived away from the watchful eyes of her family. It was a different Eleanor than the one who meticulously planned our meals and managed our household. This Eleanor was vibrant, artistic, and deeply in love. As I read, a strange sense of peace began to settle over me. It wasn't the absence of pain, but a growing understanding. My father's words about forgiveness and acceptance resonated. This wasn't a betrayal of his love, but an expansion of my understanding of my mother. She was not a simple equation, but a complex, multifaceted human being. I reached for another letter, and then another. Each one offered a glimpse into their world, a world of shared secrets and whispered affections. David's words were filled with a tenderness that was both heartbreaking and beautiful. He never spoke of his feelings for my father, never acknowledged the existence of our family directly. Theirs was a world apart, a sanctuary built on shared understanding and unspoken needs. I dream of a day, one letter read, when we can walk hand in hand under the open sky without fear, without pretense. But until then, know that my heart beats only for you, my dearest Eleanor. You are my sun, my moon, and all my stars. I felt a tear trace a path down my cheek. It wasn't a tear of sadness, but of empathy. I finally understood the multitudes my father had spoken of. My mother contained multitudes, and one of them was this passionate artist, this woman who loved and was loved in return, in a way that transcended the ordinary. My father reappeared in the doorway, drying his hands on a dish towel. He saw me with the letters, my head bent, my shoulders slightly slumped. He didn't say anything at first, just offered a gentle, understanding look. "Finish the coffee?" he asked, his voice soft. I nodded, carefully placing the letter back into the stack. "I'm reading them," I said, my voice a little hoarse. He walked over and sat down beside me, his presence a quiet comfort. "It's a lot to absorb," he said, her whole other life. "It's beautiful," I admitted, the words surprising even myself. "And sad, so sad." "Love often is," he replied, his gaze thoughtful. "Especially when it has to live in the shadows. But it also has a remarkable way of finding its own light." He gestured to the letters. Did he mention anything about his art? About where he might have gone? I shook my head. "Not really. He talks about painting for her, about how she inspired him. But he never says where he is, or what his plans are. It's all focused on their connection." I paused, then asked, "Did you ever wonder where he went?" My father sighed, a sound that carried the weight of years. "Of course. For a long time, I did. I wondered if he'd simply disappeared, if he'd moved on. But looking back now, knowing what I know, I think he respected your mother's boundaries. He understood the life she had built, the responsibilities she carried. He was a part of her escape, her sanctuary. But perhaps he knew he couldn't be a permanent fixture." He picked up the wooden bird, turning it over in his own hands. "This little bird," he said, his voice low, "is a testament to that. A gift, a memory, but also perhaps a symbol of his understanding. He left her something beautiful, something she could keep with her, that wouldn't disrupt the life she had." I looked at the bird, then at the letters. The pieces were starting to fit together, not perfectly, but with a growing clarity. My mother had lived a life of quiet compromises, of hidden passions. She had loved my father, built a family with him, and yet her heart had also held a place for David, for his art, for a different kind of love. What if, I began, my voice hesitant, what if we tried to find out more about his art, about his paintings? Even if he's gone, his work, it's still here. My father looked at me, a flicker of surprise in his eyes, followed by a slow, thoughtful nod. That's an interesting thought, Sarah. It's a way of honoring her, of acknowledging this part of her life that she kept so carefully guarded. We could try. It might lead us down a rabbit hole. We might find nothing, but it's worth considering. He put the bird back in the box. This is her story, Sarah. All of it. The good, the complicated, the hidden. And now, it's ours to hold, to understand. He stood up, stretching his legs. I think I might go for a walk. Clear my head. You take your time with those letters. There's no rush. And when you're ready, we can talk more. About David, about Eleanor. He left the room, and I was once again alone with the box and its contents. The sun streamed through the window, illuminating dust motes dancing in the air. The world outside continued its oblivious rhythm, but here, in this quiet space, a profound shift was occurring. I picked up another letter, the paper cool against my fingertips. It was a new chapter, a story unfolding, and I was ready to read it. The weight of the box felt different now. It wasn't a burden of secrets, but a treasure trove of a life lived, a life that was far richer and more complex than I had ever imagined. And as I continued to read, I felt a growing sense of connection, not just to my mother, but to the woman she had been, the woman who had loved and been loved in a way that defied easy definition. The final letter was dated years after the others, a stark contrast to the impassioned prose that preceded it. The handwriting was shaky, less fluid, the ink a faded brown. It was short, almost abrupt. My dearest Eleanor, it began. The light is fading. My hands can no longer hold the brush with the steadiness required. The colors blur. But I have completed it, the landscape, the place where we dreamt of being free. It is in the attic, tucked away. A testament, a memory. I leave it to you. Perhaps one day you will see it again. Perhaps one day it will find its own light. Yours, always, David. My heart hammered against my ribs. The attic. My father had mentioned the attic, a place of forgotten things, of dusty relics. I knew where I had to go. Scrambling to my feet, I clutched the letters to my chest. The scent of lavender, now mingled with the musty aroma of the attic, seemed to cling to me. I ascended the creaking stairs, each step a prelude to revelation. Dust motes danced in the single beam of light that pierced the gloom from a grimy window. Boxes overflowed with discarded memories, old clothes, photo albums, forgotten toys. And there, in a far corner, beneath a tattered canvas dropcloth, I found it. A large, rectangular shape. My hands trembled as I pulled away the cloth. And then I saw it. It was breathtaking. A landscape of rolling hills, bathed in a light so warm, so vibrant, it seemed to emanate from the canvas itself. The colors were rich, saturated, emerald greens, fiery oranges, a sky of impossible blue. It wasn't just a painting. It was an emotion captured, a feeling solidified. It was the place David had described, the place of their dreams. And in the corner, barely visible, A small, intricately carved wooden bird rested on a patch of painted grass. Tears streamed down my face, not of sorrow, but of a profound, overwhelming understanding. This was it, the missing piece, the tangible proof of a love that had existed, that had shaped my mother in ways I could never have imagined. I descended the stairs, the painting carefully cradled in my arms. My father was in the living room, reading. He looked up, his eyes widening at the sight. "Sarah?" he said, his voice hushed. "The attic," I whispered, my voice thick with emotion. "He left it for me, for us." He rose, approaching me slowly. He gazed at the painting, his expression a mixture of awe and something akin to recognition. It's magnificent," he breathed. He reached out, his fingers gently tracing the edge of the canvas. "I never knew." "He finished it," I said, my voice gaining strength. "He wanted her to have it, a place where they could be free." My father looked at me, his gaze steady and kind. "And now it's here, a part of her story, a part of our story." He put an arm around my shoulders. "Your mother, she held so much within her, so much love, so much quiet strength." We stood there for a long moment, bathed in the golden light of David's masterpiece. The air crackled with unspoken emotions, with years of history finally coming to light. "What do we do with it?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. My father smiled, a gentle, knowing smile. "We honor it," he said. "We honor her. We keep it. Perhaps we find a place for it where it can be seen, where its light can shine. Your mother deserves that, and so does David." He squeezed my shoulder. "And so do we, Sarah. We deserve to understand, to embrace all the complexities of the people we loved." The following weeks were a blur of gentle conversations, of sharing memories, of piecing together the fragments of my mother's hidden life. We spoke of David, not as a rival, but as a soulmate, a kindred spirit who had touched my mother's life in a profound and beautiful way. My father spoke of his own love for my mother with a renewed appreciation, acknowledging that love could exist in many forms, and that his own love had been the foundation upon which she had built their family. He spoke of his forgiveness, not as a concession, but as an act of understanding, of recognizing the inherent goodness and complexity in every human heart. The painting found its place in our sunroom, a vibrant splash of color against the muted walls. It drew the eye. It sparked conversation. It became a silent, radiant testament to a love that had endured, a love that had found its way into the light. My mother's story was no longer a mystery, but a tapestry woven with threads of duty, of family, and of a passionate, artistic soul who had loved deeply and been loved in return. The void left by her absence was not filled, but it was transformed. It became a space for remembrance, for understanding, and for a quiet, abiding love that encompassed all versions of the woman I had known and the woman she had been. My father and I, we found a new rhythm, a deeper connection forged in the shared understanding of this revelation. He learned to see the artist in his late wife, and I learned to see the enduring strength of the man who had loved her through it all. We were no longer just mother and daughter, or husband and wife, but custodians of a shared legacy, keepers of a beautiful, complicated truth. The wooden bird, still nestled in its box, became a symbol of his understanding, a quiet reminder of his respect, his love, and his profound acceptance. The sunroom, bathed in the golden light of David's landscape, became our sanctuary. It was a place where we could sit together, share a cup of tea, and simply be.
Inhale before
The questions had been answered, the conflicts resolved, not with dramatic pronouncements,
heavy
but with the quiet grace of acceptance and love. My mother, the woman who had meticulously planned our meals and managed our household, had also been Eleanor, the muse, the beloved. She had contained multitudes, and in understanding them, I finally understood myself.
but the tension
The journey through her hidden life had been a journey into the depths of human connection, of the enduring power of love in all its forms, and of the quiet strength found in acknowledging and embracing the entire spectrum of a life lived. We had found closure, not in forgetting, but in remembering, in understanding, and in cherishing the rich, complex tapestry of the woman who had given us life, and who had, in her own extraordinary way, given us light.